So my name's Joe Kirby, Principal Go-to-Market Specialist in Builder Experience at Amazon Web Services. Builder Experience is the range of services that support our developers specifically. And for the next few minutes, we're going to talk about sort of continuous operations and how AWS sort of thinks about that before we dive deep into the specifics of this service. So continuous operations, as defined by Gartner, is those characteristics of a system that reduce or eliminate the need for planned downtime. So think sort of scheduled maintenance. And the way that AWS, we build our tools and services is really designed with resilience in mind, right? How do we design these services so that they're up and they're capable and they support our customers? And then if you combine the services with something like the well-architected framework, it enables our customers to plug these things together in a way that does support resilience and really does drive towards this idea of continuous operations and reducing the need for downtime. So from the perspective of today, within sort of the Builder Experience portfolio, we cover all steps of the software development lifecycle. And for the purposes of this conversation today, I'm going to focus on observability. Over the rest of the sessions today, we'll dive deeper into observability as a whole, but for now, I'm going to focus on AI ops and how we've used machine learning to address some of the traditional observability challenges. So let's dive in here to sort of DevOps Guru and why are we talking about this thing today. So what are some of the challenges that we hear from our customers? And it really comes with scale and speed where we see these challenges. As someone who spent a lot of years working in managed hosting, going back many years and working with customers, the speed was slower, right? We didn't do as many things, there weren't as many changes, but when you're moving at cloud speed, with the ability to use automation and scale to push application changes, infrastructure changes, it can be really challenging to stay on top of all of that. And what we end up with is a situation where we can end up with too many resources, generating too many metrics with just a huge volume of logs, changing very rapidly. And so how do we stay on top of that as customers? And what we then start to see is the folks who say, well, I built this thing and I know this particular device is really important, so I'm going to put an alarm on that, right? And that'll be really good, and I'll be able to track that. And the challenge with these handcrafted alarms is they become unwieldy. There's so many of them, and which resources are important? How do we really know that? What we see a lot is this idea of preventable issues. I'd be willing to, I would suppose that many of the folks listening to this have heard the situation. Yeah, this thing keeps happening. We keep seeing this issue. We just really can't get to the bottom of it. And how do we help our customers solve that problem, right? And it really is this idea of repetitive outages, repetitive problems are really impacting this idea of continuous operations. And the outcome of these is really getting to this idea of increased, the outcome of these three things is really driving an increased MTTR, mean time to respond. And we get this increase happens because of noisy alarms, like we talked about before. Those handcrafted alarms can get kind of noisy. And then there's also missing alarms. What one person thought was important, someone else may not know is important. And so it really does become a challenge when people are getting woken up at 3 a.m. What was important? How do I understand that? And what am I going to do moving forward? And so when we think about observability, we think about it in this notion of the maturity. And there's, as with most maturity models, right, there's always opportunity to be better. But generally speaking, we look at this in sort of 4 ways. And there's this notion of, at level 1, is sort of the infrastructure monitor, right? Is it on? Is my machine on? Is it off? Is it up and on the network, right? Some very straightforward things. Level 2, you start combining that with alarms, visualizations. Now you would start incorporating something like X-ray or tools to instrument your code, so you would know not only is my infrastructure up, but also this application running. Then when we get into level 3, this is where we start getting not only reactive, something happened, but now we're dealing with proactive, which is something is going to happen. And when we get into this predictive, this is where we start dealing with machine learning algorithms, right? I am looking at this data and I am able to predict that this thing is going to break. And therefore I can tell you, and then you have the opportunity to do something about it. At level 4, you get into this notion of self-healing. So not only could the system tell you that something was about to happen, but it would also fix it proactively and then tell you that it fixed it. Or if something's actually happening, it can go and automatically apply a runbook or automatically apply some steps to fix known issues. All of these, this notion of observability really is the sort of cornerstone of continuous operations, right? If you don't know there's a problem, you can't fix it. And so what is DevOps Guru? So DevOps Guru is a fully managed AI-powered observability service that really focuses on automating alarm creation and automatically tuning them. We can help troubleshoot with a rich context and recommendations that reduce the mean time to resolution, right? If we can help you point to what's actually the problem, then that saves you time in terms of identifying the root cause. And then also by forecasting resource needs and giving you some proactive notification of, hey, this thing's about to become a problem, it gives our customers an opportunity to actually step in before something does become a problem. So from a feature perspective, easy setup, right? DevOps Guru is intended if you've got tags on your resources or something like that, you provision new resources with the same tag, we'll simply know that it exists. You don't have to go in and start specifying any kind of alarms on these net new resources, just you sort of know it's there. And then as we're dynamically discovering these resources, we're also looking for continuously observing the metrics, the logs, and potentially traces from those devices. These two combine together to give you a reduced mean time to resolution, right? Because we're automating setup on net new resources, and because we're able to start looking at all of the appropriate metrics, we can start delivering insights very quickly that will enable customers to resolve issues a lot more rapidly. And finally, this notion of proactive insights. We run our machine learning models across infrastructure, identify potential problems, and then we can notify customers ahead of when that happens. And frankly, if we can give you, depending on the insight, it could be, as an operations guy, hey, if you can give me 15 minutes heads up, that's sufficient. Or it might be multiple hours or multiple days, depending on what the pattern is. But if you can tell me ahead of time, I can do something about it and reduce potential maintenance or reduce potential outages and move towards this notion of continuing operations. So in terms of getting started with DevOps Guru, how does that sort of work? So first step is defining your application. And in this instance, you're defining your application boundary. You can do this with tags. You can do it as a CloudFormation stack, or you can frankly give us your entire account and we'll just monitor it. We'll start collecting historical application and infrastructure metrics to start setting up a baseline. And from that, we'll work on detecting anomalies. You can connect DevOps Guru to SNS topics or EventBridge or your preferred third-party tool to integrate your communication or integrate the insights from DevOps Guru into your existing processes. And finally, you will start receiving reactive and proactive insights with recommendations to resolve the anomalies. As I mentioned, reactive is something's happening and you need to be able to fix it. Proactive is something is going to happen and we're going to give you advance notice so that you can fix it ahead of time. So let's take a look at an example of insights. So what we're looking at here is the Lambda duration is anomalous, right? So Lambda functions are ideally these short-lived functions, and they shouldn't be running too long, typically designed to run very, very quickly. So what we see in this example is an insight generated by a Lambda function that's running for an extended period of time. For those that don't know, Lambda functions are generally designed to be something that can run very quickly and run very frequently. So if it's running for an extended period of time, that would be odd, considering what they're designed to do. And so if we look at the insight example here, in the top left, it will say, hey, here's the insight, here's what triggered this situation. So it was an anomalous Lambda breaching a high threshold in terms of runtime. What you would then see, so on the bottom left, when you start clicking in, you will see the aggregated metrics. And so what it's looking at here is all of the metrics that it combined in order to derive the insight. And then if you look at top right, you click in further, and now we can actually see specific detail as it relates to each of those individual metrics. And then finally, on the bottom right, you'll see an actual specific recommendation for what to do about this insight that you received. And so this is a very typical workflow where you deliver an insight, you click in, you see the details around the metrics, you can dig in further and see deeper detail, and then you would also see an insight. Okay. So one of the other things that's been sort of really interesting for us is focusing deep into a specific area. And so with DevOps Guru for RDS, what we've been able to do is really focus our insights in machine learning around database problems. And so typically conventional monitoring really struggles with some of these things. They generally, but what we've done is rethink this. So we use a metric primarily called DB load, which is designed for service quality rather than looking at sort of CPU or memory or some of these other things. There's a metric that says, hey, how busy am I actually, right? Am I actually able to service my customer requests? So we use DB load, which is a reliable barometer for service quality, rather than looking at sort of CPU or memory or disk in of themselves. We look at this load, which gives a much more combined metric. And then we identify anomalies that differ from historical baselines. We're not relying on static thresholds. So we're not relying on something that says, hey, if the CPU goes above 80%, send a threshold, right? We're not doing that because that's not particularly helpful. You can see a very heavily loaded box that's quite happily serving content. In this instance, we're not relying on those. We then perform some machine learning-based reasoning on the analysis to find the causes, on the anomaly to find causes. Like, so what else is happening in this environment? We're looking at logs and other things here to sort of see what's what. We then highlight the chief contributors to the anomaly. So within the construct of the insight that we're sending, we will actually find the core pieces to that. And then we will give you specific recommendations and remediation steps. So because this load is high, here's the cause, here's how you can fix it. So how does DevOps Guru help you? So without DevOps Guru, so in terms of alarm creation, right? Without DevOps Guru, you end up, customers have sort of gone through this process of manually creating alarms per resource, which requires expertise typically to choose the right metrics for each resource. If I'm a systems administrator, I might know the typical thresholds on a Windows VM or something else, but I may not know the thresholds I should apply to Lambda or to managed services. If I'm a database person, I may not know how to apply those to systems. And so the insight and the knowledge about how to create custom alarms is spread throughout the teams. But with DevOps Guru, the automatic creation and monitoring of vended metrics means there's no requirement to create custom alarms per resource or resource type. From an alarm maintenance perspective, customers often end up having to manually update these. Hey, I just added new boxes. I've added new thresholds. My application changed. Now the behavior is different and I need to modify my alarms. Within DevOps Guru, we automatically detect when resources are created and deleted, and we also continually tune baselines. So if your application changes and your baseline sort of utilization rises, then the baselines will get retuned for that. We'll understand the fact that your application changed and you don't have to go back and manage all the metrics. For operational issues, customers are constantly talking about using tools to build dashboards with relevant information, and there's just a lot of alarms. There's a lot of noise being generated by monitoring tools. So how do we get to a place where we can reduce that? And so because within DevOps Guru, we automatically dynamically gather context for the operational issues and correlate these anomalies across multiple services, we can actually help you reduce the noise, right? Let's get signal and less noise. Within the construct of mitigating issues, right? In MTTR, sometimes even if you can find what the cause is, getting a solution can be challenging. And so within the construct of the insight, we can actually provide you guidance as here's how you should go about remedying this particular situation. And then the notion of proactive alarms. So proactive alarms. So in this instance, when customers are talking about an issue happening consistently, often all they need is a quick heads up to be able to get ahead of it. And so with proactive alarms, we can look at your history, look at your baselines, and look for that and say, oh, this thing, based on what we've seen, is about to happen. You should probably go fix it. You should probably take care of this. So from a customer perspective, these are some of the feedback we've got from DevOps Guru customers. So 605, the challenge was continuing growth in the cloud, and they were thinking either we're going to have to add staff or do something around observability. Like, how are we going to get ahead of this? And so by enabling DevOps Guru, they could figure out that the operational efficiency they could gain would allow them to do more with their existing staff. By applying AI to their existing operational processes and observability processes, they could get a fourfold decrease in the number of alerts and reduce the false positives, which also be confusing. And so they reduced the false positive rate from 76% down to 18.9. And then with some of our other interesting customers that have also used and gained from the service. So HCL reduced their mean time to recovery, always looking at the amount of time our teams spend on resolving operational issues, right? They were able to take advantage of DevOps Guru and get those MTTRs down, reducing outages, reducing, operational challenges, reducing engineering time. And so Thomson Reuters were able to use DevOps Guru to reduce noise and save time with the ML-powered insights that the service provides. They were really looking to focus on customer experience and satisfaction. And then when they were getting multiple sources of events and alerts, it was challenging, time-consuming to sort of figure out what was relevant and filter those through. And so they were able to leverage DevOps Guru to do that work for them, to provide the insights and clearer path for action. So, from next steps, how can you give DevOps Guru a try? The easiest way is to go into the console, go to DevOps Guru, and then identify an account or a subset of resources that you would like this service to monitor. For the first 3 months, we'll give you an analysis of 7,200 resource hours per resource group and 10,000 DevOps Guru API calls a month included in that. One observation, because we're looking for any of these tools to actually deliver valuable insight, there needs to actually be activity in the account. And so we have seen situations where customers have sort of tried it in test accounts that don't seem to have a lot of activity, and there's not a lot of activity. So what we have seen is it can be quite effective to turn this on in something that's got some reasonable amount of activity on a subset of resources, and you're much more likely to get good data. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Glad you were able to spend 20 minutes or so with me. And we'll see you later on in some of the other sessions.